production history and development timeline. The 2005 Fantastic Four film had a lengthy development journey that spanned decades. The rights to a Fantastic Four movie were first optioned in the 1980s by producer Bernd Eichinger of Constantin Film, who met Marvel's Stan Lee as early as 1983 to discuss the project. When facing an expiring option in 1992, Eichinger famously commissioned a low-budget adaptation produced by Roger Corman purely to retain the rights. That ultra-cheap 1994 Fantastic Four film was never released, with Marvel executives, including Avi Arad, later buying the film's negative to clear the way for a proper big-budget version. This maneuver preserved the franchise for a future studio-backed production. Throughout the late 1990s, 20th Century Fox, in partnership with Eichinger and Marvel, struggled to get Fantastic Four off the ground. A revolving door of creatives became attached. Fox hired Chris Columbus to write and direct in 1995, and he developed a screenplay with Michael France before stepping aside to produce via his 1492 Pictures label. By 1997, Peter Siegel was briefly on board. Then Sam Weisman took over later that year. Multiple script rewrites followed, including one by Batman scribe Sam Hamm in 1998, as the studio attempted to rein in a soaring budget, at one point projected at $165 million. With development dragging, Fox and Marvel extended the rights in 1999, eyeing a 2001 release and even hiring director Roger Gosnell, who ultimately left to make Scooby-Doo. The project remained in limbo into the early 2000s. A major turning point came when filmmaker Peyton Reed signed on in 2001. Reed spent over a year developing Fantastic Four, reportedly envisioning a lighthearted 1960s-influenced tone, and worked with 3 different sets of writers. However, Reed departed in July 2003 due to creative differences. He later explained that Fox had a very different movie in mind, and they were also chasing a release date, so we ended up parting company. After this setback, Fox finally found its director in Tim Story. In April 2004, Story was hired on the strength of his prior work, Barbershop and an early cut of Taxi, and his genuine enthusiasm as a fan of the comic. With Story at the helm, screenwriter Mark Frost, co-creator of Twin Peaks, and others polished the script, and even Simon Kinberg contributed uncredited rewrites. Notably, when Story and Marvel's team saw Pixar's The Incredibles in late 2004, a film with uncanny parallels to the Fantastic Four's family of superheroes, they made last-minute script changes and added more effects to differentiate their movie. For example, an entire gag involving the Thing rescuing a cat from a tree was cut, since The Incredibles had a similar moment. By the time cameras rolled in August 2004, the long-gestating project finally had a green light, with principal photography taking place in Vancouver and wrap-up reshoots as late as May 2005. The result was a 106-minute summer blockbuster co-produced by Constantin Film, 20th Century Fox, Marvel Enterprises, and 1492 Pictures, a culmination of over 10 years of development twists and turns. Casting the first family of Marvel. Casting the main roles of Fantastic Four involved a mix of up-and-coming talent and unconventional choices, with a few surprising near misses. Ioan Gruffudd won the part of scientist Reed Richards' Mr. Fantastic after an audition process that even saw Danish actor Mads Mikkelsen try out for the stretchy superhero. Mikkelsen later recalled his audition as humiliating, as he was asked to mime Reed's elastic powers in an empty room. Gruffudd, a Welsh actor, had to adopt an American accent and embody the brainy but sincere team leader. Jessica Alba was cast as Sue Storm, Invisible Woman, a decision met with some fans' skepticism since the Latina actress didn't match the blonde, blue-eyed look of Sue from the comics. Nonetheless, Alba, then known for Dark Angel, brought youth appeal and worked with the filmmakers to portray Sue as the grounded, compassionate core of the team. She reportedly dyed her hair blonde for the role and wore blue contact lenses to closer resemble the comic character, a minor behind-the-scenes effort to appease fans. Chris Evans, in one of his early breakout roles, was cast as Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, after impressing the producers with his charismatic, cocky persona. An actor named Andrew Walker had auditioned for Johnny, but the part ultimately went to Evans, who proved a natural fit for the hot-headed prankster pilot. Evans brought a youthful energy and underwent physical training to convincingly perform Johnny's daredevil stunts, like motocross sequences and weightless space scenes, displaying the athleticism and swagger the character demanded. Michael Chiklis took on the role of Ben Grimm, the Thing, a casting celebrated by many fans, as Chiklis was himself a lifelong Fantastic Four devotee. Best known as the tough cop on TV's The Shield, Chiklis lobbied for the part and even agreed to wear an elaborate full-body prosthetic suit rather than rely on CGI. His preparation was as much mental as physical. Chiklis wanted to capture Ben Grimm's big-hearted, tragicomic nature beneath the rocky exterior. He later admitted that the experience was far more arduous than he anticipated, calling it the most daunting experience of my life once he spent long days encased in the 60-pound Thing suit. Other key casting included Julian McMahon, fresh off TV's Nip Tuck, as the villain Victor Von Doom. McMahon brought a suave yet menacing presence to Dr. Doom, the power-hungry industrialist. He worked with voice coaches to drop his Australian accent, aiming for a cold, refined tone for Doom's dialogue, and endured his own share of discomfort wearing metallic armor and facial prosthetics for the character's gradual transformation. Rounding out the ensemble was Kerry Washington as Alicia Masters, Ben's blind love interest, among others. Behind the scenes, the chemistry among the quartet developed quickly. Ioan Gruffudd, Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, and Michael Chiklis bonded during rehearsal and downtime, mirroring the sibling-like camaraderie of their characters. According to the cast, playful banter on set was common. Evans in particular kept the mood light with jokes, often in Johnny Storm style, which helped the group form a family dynamic by the time cameras rolled. This rapport translated to the screen, providing a sense of authenticity to the Fantastic Four's relationships, even when the critical response to the film was mixed. Special effects bringing superpowers to life. Creating the fantastical powers of the Fantastic Four on film required a blend of cutting-edge CGI and old-school practical effects, delivered by numerous VFX vendors and artists. In total, the production featured 885 visual effects shots handled by a dozen different studios, coordinated under overall VFX supervisor Kurt Williams. Williams and his team set up a centralized pipeline to manage the many vendors' work, essentially acting as the central nervous system for all effects sequences. Below are some of the key effects studios and their contributions to the film's visuals. Spectral motion, practical effects. Makeup effects. Guru Mike Elizaldi's company, Spectral Motion, created the full-body Thing suit and other prosthetics. Rather than use a CGI model for Ben Grimm, the filmmakers opted for a real actor in a rock-like suit to achieve a more tangible presence. The suit was composed of foam latex pieces over a body framework with mechanical hands. Chiklis wore a special glove that gave the Thing 3 oversized fingers and animatronic facial features. It took up to 2 hours each day to get Chiklis into makeup and costume. Spectral Motion also provided Dr. Doom's prosthetic applications, such as the eerie metal-like skin and veined effects as Doom's condition advances, and built a muscle suit under Doom's costume to enhance McMahon's physique. Giant killer robots, CGI, Human Torch and energy effects. San Francisco-based Giant Killer Robots, GKR, served as one of the lead CGI houses, responsible for many of the film's flashiest effects. GKR handled Johnny Storm's Human Torch transformations, creating a fully digital flaming version of actor Chris Evans for when Johnny flames on. They developed dynamic fire simulations that had to believably emanate from a human form. GKR also generated Dr. Doom's electrical energy blasts and lightning attacks. For instance, the sequences where Doom fires bolts of electricity or channels power through his hands were animated using GKR's custom lightning effects software. Their work often intertwined with other vendors. In one climactic scene, Sue Storm's force field, by another team, blocks a Doom lightning bolt, by GKR, requiring careful coordination between effects studios. Soho VFX, CGI, Mr. Fantastic's stretching. Toronto-based Soho VFX was tasked with realizing Mr. Fantastic's elastic abilities. The challenge of a man stretching his limbs like rubber was unprecedented, so Soho VFX's artists built an entirely new rigging and modeling pipeline in Maya to allow Ioan Gruffudd's digital double to elongate in any direction. They devised a system of NURBS curves and procedural controls instead of traditional bone joints that let animators stretch Reed's arms, legs, or torso into whatever shape was needed. This rig could dynamically add hundreds of virtual vertebrae into a limb to simulate smooth elasticity. In practice, animators could switch between normal movement and stretchy mode on the fly. For example, having Reed's arm transition into a winding cable-like coil to snatch an object across the room. Fine details like skin texture stretching and the way Reed's uniform expanded were achieved with layered texture maps and muscle simulations to keep the effect realistic. Thanks to Soho's technical innovations, sequences like Reed reaching under a door or forming his body into wild shapes were pulled off convincingly. Stan Winston Digital, CGI, Invisible Woman's Powers. Legendary creature creator Stan Winston's digital division contributed key effects for Susan Storm's invisibility and force fields. One tricky aspect was depicting Sue turning invisible while wearing regular clothing. The solution involved creating CGI clothing that would remain visible, hovering in midair even as Sue disappears, then animating those garments with realistic physics. The team used Sci-Flex cloth simulation in Softimage XSI to make CG versions of Sue's jacket or dress flutter and float believably as her body vanishes. Extensive compositing and rotoscoping were needed so that pieces of Sue's body, occluding the clothing, could be painted out frame by frame. For Sue's transparent force field bubbles and shields, Stan Winston Digital blended geometry-based soft body simulations with particle and fluid effects, also using XSI. An example of their work is the scene where Sue contains a massive explosion inside a force field dome, a complex effect achieved by combining semi-transparent 3D force field surfaces with dynamic lighting and debris particles. Stan Winston's team often collaborated with others. For instance, in the showdown with Doom, Sue's invisible force shield, their work, is struck by Doom's CGI energy beam, GKR's work, requiring seamless integration in the composite. On-set challenges and behind-the-scenes trials. The production of Fantastic Four faced numerous logistical and creative challenges during filming. A prominent hurdle was the physical demands on actors, especially Michael Chiklis in his Thing costume. Chiklis had insisted on a practical suit to portray Ben Grimm, which lent realism but at a cost. The foam latex suit, with its rock-like skin and built-in muscle padding, was oppressively hot and heavy, turning the simplest scenes into an endurance test. It was just brutally hot, brutally difficult, Chiklis said, describing the experience as physically and emotionally taxing, to the point where he did not have a great time making the movie because of the discomfort. On set, the crew had to take special care of the actor. Between takes, handlers supplied Chiklis with cold water and ice packs, and a personal fan system was occasionally used inside the suit to cool him down. Makeup artists constantly checked the prosthetic face pieces, reapplying coloring and adhesive as the actor performed under hot lights, as seen in the image above. Even with these difficulties, Chiklis delivered a lauded performance, but he later joked that getting back into that suit for a sequel would require a good reason, namely audience enthusiasm for the first film. Other on-set challenges stemmed from coordinating complex action sequences and effects shots. The production's biggest set piece, a chaotic traffic pileup and rescue on the Brooklyn Bridge, was a massive undertaking. It required shutting down portions of a bridge, recreated partially on a Vancouver backlot, and organizing hundreds of extras, vehicles, and pyrotechnics. Timing the practical stunts, such as a jackknifing truck and explosions, with the actors' performances and the planned CGI enhancements, invisible force fields stopping a fire, the things smashing through a truck, demanded careful planning and many rehearsals. Director Tim Story, making his first effects-heavy blockbuster, had to learn on the fly how to visualize scenes that would be filled in with digital characters later. He brought in a pre-visualization team from Proof Inc. to map out complicated sequences in advance as 3D animatics. This proved invaluable when, for example, Ioan Gruffudd had to act out Mr. Fantastic stretching to save people on the bridge, a power that would only exist as CGI. Story also had to strike a balance in tone during shooting. Fantastic Four has a naturally lighter, comedic flavor compared to contemporaries like Batman Begins, but the team was conscious not to let the humor slip into camp. Sometimes we'd test stuff and find out we'd gone too far, Story admitted, referencing that during production they tweaked scenes if jokes undercut the emotional stakes. Finding the fine line between comic banter and superhero drama was an ongoing creative challenge on set. Studio pressure and last-minute changes added to the difficulty. After principal photography wrapped in December 2004, Fox executives decided that the film needed a stronger family dynamic and more character moments amid the action. They mandated a round of reshoots and pickups that took place in the spring of 2005, only a few months before release. These included new dialogue scenes of the quartet bonding, for example, a lighthearted sequence of the team playing around with Johnny's powers at the Baxter Building, to ensure audiences connected with the characters. Coordinating the cast's schedules for these reshoots on short notice was tricky, but the actors returned to add the requested heartwarming touches. Meanwhile, the visual effects teams were racing against the clock in post-production. With over half the film containing VFX shots, any late change in editing or story, such as the deletion of a scene to avoid incredible similarities, meant artists had to redo work on tight deadlines. Despite these stresses, the film stayed on track for a summer release. Crew members recall a sense of nervous excitement as the July 2005 premiere loomed. They had weathered creative disagreements, technical setbacks, and even fan scrutiny. Internet forums were abuzz with every paparazzi shot of the Thing suit or rumor about Doctor Doom's portrayal. And now it was time to see how the world would receive Marvel's first family on the big screen. When Fantastic Four hit theaters in July 2005, it met with a mixed reception and generally lukewarm critical response, even as it attracted a sizable audience. Critics largely panned the film for its simplistic plot and uneven tone. On review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, it stands at only 27% approval, with a consensus that goofy humor, subpar acting, and bland storytelling made it a mediocre attempt at bringing Marvel's oldest superhero team to film. Entertainment Weekly quipped that the movie felt like something left over from the 60s, calling it old-fashioned compared to the more sophisticated superhero fare of the era. Many reviewers pointed out that in a post-Spider-Man 2, 2004, and Batman Begins, 2005 landscape, Fantastic Four seemed lightweight. However, a few elements earned praise. Critics and fans alike singled out Michael Chiklis and Chris Evans for embodying the Thing and Human Torch with charisma. Even a harsh review from ReelViews noted Chiklis' standout performance despite being buried in makeup, and appreciated some of the film's fun individual moments amid the clunky pacing. Audience scores were a bit kinder. CinemaScore polling yielded a solid B grade from moviegoers, indicating that general audiences found it entertaining enough as a summer popcorn flick. The film's light, family-friendly vibe played well with younger viewers, and some fans enjoyed that it didn't take itself too seriously. Commercially, Fantastic Four proved successful and justified the years of effort. It debuted at number 1 at the box office with a strong $56 million opening weekend. By the end of its theatrical run, the film had grossed about $330 million worldwide, on a production budget in the range of $87 to $100 million. This haul made it profitable and one of the higher-grossing superhero films of the mid-2000s. Notably, director Tim Story became the first Black director to have a major Marvel movie hit such heights, and Fantastic Four remained the highest-grossing superhero film by an African-American director until 2018's Black Panther. The healthy box office numbers led 20th Century Fox to quickly move forward with a sequel, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, which was released in 2007 with the entire principal cast and Tim Story returning. In terms of legacy, the 2005 Fantastic Four occupies an interesting place in superhero cinema history. It arrived in the early wave of modern Marvel adaptations, following hits like X-Men and Spider-Man, but was often used as an example of the genre's growing pains. The film's straightforward, somewhat cheesy approach has been criticized in hindsight. It's cited for its cartoonish villain and lack of depth, yet it also has gained a bit of a cult following for those very same qualities. For some fans, there's a nostalgic charm in its simpler, comic-booky tone that later grim and gritty reboots lacked. Indeed, 2 reboots would attempt to reimagine Marvel's first family, a 2015 Fantastic Four film by Josh Trank that flopped critically and commercially, and an upcoming integration of the Fantastic Four into Marvel's own cinematic universe, slated for 2025. These later developments underscore how challenging the property has been to get exactly right. In retrospect, the 2005 Fantastic Four is remembered as a middle-of-the-road entry. Not fantastic, as many joked, but not a complete failure either. It succeeded in introducing a new generation to Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben Grimm, and it proved that a more lighthearted, family-oriented superhero film could still draw crowds in the era before the Marvel Cinematic Universe. While it never achieved the critical acclaim of contemporaries, the film's earnest portrayal of Marvel's first family and its mix of practical and digital effects have become a time capsule of mid-2000s superhero filmmaking, paving the way, with some cautionary lessons, for the more sophisticated Fantastic Four interpretations to come.